Thursday, April 8th, 2004. This is the beginning of an interview with Mr. Reginald H. Kemp. Mr. Kemp is a veteran of the Korean conflict, during which he served with the U.S. Army in the infantry and in the combat engineers from January 1952 to December 1954. This interview is being conducted at the Atlanta History Center in Atlanta, Georgia. My name is Frederick Wallace. I am the interviewer. Mr. Kemp, as I explained to you, this is your story. And I would like for you to tell your story from giving us from the time that you entered the military service. Prior to that, tell us where you were born and why you entered the military. And from the time you entered the military, what was your first duty station? And then just take us step by step from that point on throughout your military service. Mr. Kemp, this is your story. Would you begin, please?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Reginald Kemp. I was born in 1931 to a farmer, and I continue my life in that search until I reached the age of 20 years of age. I was at that time employed at the Lockheed Aircraft Company, where I was continuing my education. But from Lockheed, I was drafted into the military. I went into Fort Jackson for my processing. My basic training was in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. There's I taken the training of infantry and combat engineers. I got a delayed route strictly from that period to Asia, which is Korea, to go to the Korea front line. And we had a refresher course, which kindly interviewed us and revived us of our basic training. And one of the most interesting points when we were fixing to go to the front line, we got an interview again from the battalion commander and the company commander. We were nearing the front line of Korea. We could hear the mortar, the guns going off. And we were instructed to remember everything that we had been taught back in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, of the United States. And he says, beyond those hills there lies the no man's land, which is the demilitarized zone. And we want you to remember and hold yourself up. And if you should be contact, there may be blood, and they do not want to see anything but blood in that area where we were fighting. But if it happened to be your blood, we want you to know that you died for your country. But as we went on...
Mr. Kemp, let me stop here a minute.
Okay.
Who was giving you this briefing?
It was the regimental of battalion commander.
And this was prior to you going into actual combat?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Which is about 3 days in front.
Okay.
Okay?
Let me stop you again.
Okay, good.
When you went into service, you were drafted.
I was drafted.
Okay. Now, had you completed school, or was it
No,
prior to completing
I
school?
was in the 11th. I was in the 11th grade. 11th grade. We were going to school at night, and also at Lockheed.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Did you have any feeling about the war at the time?
Yes. Even when I was hired, here's what was said. We didn't have to have no qualification at that time. And we were just pointed out by the hire. He pointed to myself, and he says, "You're a little young. You may have to go to Korea to fight." And then I says, "I'll be 20 Monday." He said, "We'll try you, and we hope that you will continue to stay with us." But once I was at Lockheed about almost a year, that is when I got drafted into the military.
Oh, in other words, you were working for Lockheed prior to being drafted into the military.
Correct.
At the age of 19.
19.
And who was the one that said you would go to Korea?
It was a committee that they sent out to hire people. We didn't have to make no resume or anything like that in those days.
I see, okay.
Yes.
So Lockheed was going to the schools and sending a committee out
Correct.
to find employees.
Correct.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
now I understand.
Mhm.
All right, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, go ahead, take us now. We were in Korea,
We was in Korea.
and your battalion commander had given you this briefing.
Correct.
Okay.
And as I pointed out, there should be blood in that demilitarized zone. And we don't want it to be yours. But if it happened to be yours, remember, you gave it for your country. After that, approximately 3 or 4 days, we did get attacked. And they had such a lady, I think it started in World War II, a propaganda lady that makes expressions to harass the new soldier. Says, "GI, what are you doing over here? We are no mad at you. We don't want to hurt you. You belong back in America." Now Eisenhower your president, is back in the States. They are drinking coffee. They are having a good time. They have sent soldiers over like you to be killed. We don't want to kill you. Please come out and surrender with your weapons over your head. If you do that, we will not hurt you. But if you will not do that, we will attack you at 2400 hour, and you will be made saucy balls.
From what source did you hear this?
Over a loudspeaker from the other side of the mountain. You could hear it real good.
Okay.
And that was touching. And then she goes on to say, "We don't know where you are from. You may be from city, you may be from country. You may be from Los Angeles, California. You may be from Chicago, New York, but wherever you are from, you will have to learn to compete with something of that effect, what we are going to do to you." And she continued to say a few things, and then she says, "Please come out with your weapons over your heads." It had no bearing on me. But I thought about that time after time, and I had been from really the South, and not only the South, North as well. Whereas, and I must point this out, I'm sorry, says maybe the word Gumdinga is black. Says, "Gumdinga soldiers, why are you over here, back home in America? You cannot go to school with white. You cannot eat with white. You cannot ride on bus with white. Why are you over here?" Now that was really touching, and it did not hurt as bad then as it does now. I tried to explain it after a while. And that really touched me. And I was only in about 3 major battles in about 6 months.
Let me stop you again.
Okay?
When you got to Korea and when you were listening to this propaganda, were you in an integrated unit or an all-black unit?
We were similarly integrated at that time. We were similarly integrated.
Which means that...
They had some black areas, but most of us was integrated.
Okay. So you were listening to this along with a lot of
We
the
along
other
with
white
the white
soldiers.
soldiers, correct.
And what did they comment? Did they have any comments about this?
Definitely, the commander says, pay that, you know, what he used, no attention.
Okay.
Of course, we knew that if we obeyed her, I wouldn't have been here today from my own pews there. All right.
Okay, so once you heard that, and then the commander says, pay that no attention, then what happened? What was your regular day like from that point on?
Didn't anything happen that
Okay.
night, but about 3 or 4 days, nights later, that's when they attacked. They did not attack when she said they were going to attack. And she also pointed out that we know that you are a new arrival here in Korea. And that's what they like. They said newcomers, you know, for that, what reason? Unexperienced.
Okay.
Yes.
Then you went about your daily duties, and what were those duties?
Building bunkers, with sandbags, and getting supplies in, and being on guard duty and alert at all times, all day and night.
Okay.
Yes,
So you were, at this point, a part of the combat engineers, is that correct?
correct. You're right.
And the commission of combat engineers was to
build roads and bridges, so
And-
as material and supplies could get by, I say, to the front and in the area which they were really being used.
Okay, at what point did you actually start building roads?
It must have been about 2 weeks after we have gotten over there, about roughly two weeks, a week and a half or something.
Okay, tell us about that, describe that experience.
Pontoon bridges, that is a bridge that floats on water. You have heavy equipment to grade off the rough areas where a deuce and a half can come beside the mountain, cross the rivers, and
A deuce and a half is a truck.
truck,
isn't it?
that's a truck
Okay.
with 4 wheels, 8 wheels on it, and it can carry heavy equipment, pull heavy weapons along with light weapon supplies. Yes. Yes.
And
Okay.
you were talking about the pontoon bridge.
Well, that is, let me see, how do we do that? We put, say, it's contained with tank air, and it floats on water, and you continue to build a bridge on the water as you go, with guidelines on each side to, we have soldiers to go over on one side, and then on the other side with materials such as trucks and all that to pull cables, and finally when you put enough of them across that's going to the other side, then the vehicles can come right on across.
And this is what you were trained for?
But we were trained for that
and
in
you
Fort
would-
Belvoir.
And this is what you were doing there?
Correct, at that time.
Okay. And you would do this every day?
Not every day. Such as guard duties and patrols. We'd go out at night trying to find out where the enemy's strongest points was and all of that. And we had to make a report.
And who was the leader of the group that you were a part of?
We had, the one that was with us was mostly a commissioned officer, commander, the lieutenants, and then the sergeants. And we had, normally it was 7 men on a squad, and various groups. We never stayed together much, but we always stayed where we could communicate, because we didn't want too many people in one little area on account of the enemy.
So you could communicate with the whole squad?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. 7
When
men
you say
in
we
a
did
group.
7 men in a
A
group?
group, yeah.
Okay, but no more than 7 men in a group?
It could be the low as 5, and it could be as high as 10, but normally it's about 7 men.
I see, and that was deliberate so that you would not have too many men
the same
together
point.
at the same point.
Correct.
And this is when you would go scouting to
Correct.
see what the enemy was doing, and then
Correct.
come back and report.
Report.
Okay. And when you came back to report, what happened?
The key was when it was real quiet in an area, there was preparation being made to attack. But if there was a little noise, you didn't have too much to worry about. No shiny instrument where if it's daytime it reflect from the sun. No shiny instrument there, not even a spoon. And we could always go out beyond this hill or in this valley to see what was going on in the valley at the enemy's area. And they were doing us the same way. We were spies, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead.
And we could always make a report, and if it was important what we reported, then the company commanders and battalion commanders could make preparation to get ready to receive or attack the enemies.
What was life like in the area where you were living, in your barracks area, in your camp?
It was similarly a tent or a trench. A tent is when you temporarily, that's on the back of the front line, where your supplies were stored at. But in the trenches and foxholes, it was just a trench, as we found back there the other day. What's the name in this war? You had to come out of your trench. We had our shovels, a trench from you to me, and a foxhole and a bunker where you set up machine guns. And then in the rear of you were your heavy weapons.
And you slept in that trench?
Oh yes. But they normally, about two would sleep together when it was like 0 up to as high as, I think it was high as 16 degrees below 0 at one time. I was over there in the winter.
Hmm.
Yes.
And did you have a mess hall?
No.
How did?
Now the reason we did not have a mess hall, because if we got attacked, too many people that assembled in one place, too many would get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
You always ate separately, scattered. Yes.
So your entire day was taken up by being on the alert for possible attack.
Alert at all time. And keep your weapon with you at all time. When you're eating, it had sling up on your shoulder. And it's hard at first, but once you get attacked, you will want it there. Once you get attacked by the enemy and get caught, I'm here and your weapon 100 foot away, then you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is how you spent your days and your nights.
Correct.
Was there any time that you felt that you were able to relax?
Well, this is the expression they used to give us. You spend 24 hours being alert and being a soldier, and all over 24 hours per day is yours. They used to tell us that. Yes,
and that certainly was true, is that right?
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay, tell me something that stands out in your mind as an experience that you had while you were there.
I'm a member, church Christian, and I remember when I left my mother, I wasn't married at that time, and when the going got tough, one of those battles, I think, is when the going got so rough. I says to myself, and it was cold, and I said to myself that and when I seen the enemies and I seen so many of my fellows wasn't able to make it, I said it may be easier for me just to get it over with. But when those thoughts came to me, I thought about my late mother. She's waiting to see me. And whatever it takes, I will endure the pain, the suffering, to try to make her happy. And it's worked.
To get back home.
To get back home. That was one of the most touching times of my life, when I came to thinking, and when I sat there and says to myself and thinking, what would America do if they knew what was going on over here, to see the casualties? And definitely there was at least 5 enemies to one American that was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And when 9/11 came to America last year, I thought about those thoughts that I was thinking of, when, what would America do if we were in this situation, as what we see in Korea. And I'm thinking about the 9/11 bombing here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we can can endure what other countries have. And I don't like war. I do not like war, period. And I'm sorry this war is on now that we have.
When you say we could not sustain it, you mean we could not, America as a country could not sustain the type of bombing?
No, I don't think we can take that as good as other countries.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But
did you have friends and buddies that were with you?
Yes,
while you were there?
Quite a few. And I lost 3 of my buddies, one from Mississippi, one from Illinois, and the other from North Carolina.
How did you lose them? How were they killed?
Were in battle. One of them, we were being attacked, and he made a misstep on the pontoon bridge, and in this deep current, the water taking him away. But the other 2 by weapons.
Enemy fire?
Enemy fire.
And when that happened, did you see that happen? Were you there when it happened?
No, I wasn't. Well, maybe a half a minute after that, I was there,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's what I discovered.
Mm-hmm.
And one touching friend of mine, there's 4, and we had some sea rations, and we would learn to share with one another with our sea rations.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not know that he was hurt. I've seen some blood, but he told the other friend that was with me, why don't y'all just go ahead and eat my portion, so it won't do me any good. Well, we are not going to take your part. And then he collapsed because he knew he was hurt, and we didn't know it.
Yeah.
And that was touching. I think about that now.
Mm-hmm.
That's
So you said that you were in the combat engineers and also in the infantry.
yeah.
At what point?
This last point is in the infantry that I'm explaining then.
Okay. What happened to cause you to be reassigned from the combat engineers to the infantry?
It was being alternated for some reason. I forget what that. We had a choice to stay with the engineers or be transferred to the infantry. And I was thinking that the infantry is more safer than the engineers.
That's unusual. Why do you say that?
You just don't have see, the engineers have to go in front, and your enemy has 100%. They have been set up, and they have you under observation. They can see you, but we can't see them. Now, they're not going to attack you at the beginning. They're going to wait till you get 90% finished with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
See, they can destroy you and destroy your equipment. But if they start before you have, constructed anything, it's not not successful enough.
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
So they wait until you get almost finished,
Correct.
and then they attack.
They attack the body and the structural part.
Uh-huh. And you lost,
Lost everything then.
yeah, you lost quite a few soldiers during attacks such as that?
Quite a few soldiers, but let me see. I guess I know of at least that I was acquainted with some, I say between 15 and 20.
That's not a whole lot.
Yeah.
So you felt that it would be safer as in the infantry?
Very much, because as I said, the engineers goes in front.
Mhm.
Then your enemy, then your infantry comes in the rear. Secondly,
Mhm.
and they's pretty well equally then.
So you accepted transfer to
Correct.
the infantry,
Correct.
and did you have to go through training?
So I already had that back over here for both.
Oh, you
for
had
both of
the
them.
training for both.
Yeah, so it was easy for us to get transferred because we had been trained for both capacity. I mean, infantry and
Were you
engineers.
reassigned to a different location?
Yes, well, it was in the same battalion. Yeah, it was a different location, definitely.
Mhm.
Different, yeah.
And when you got to the new location, what was your thinking then? What was your feeling?
Just wait, hurry to wait. And as I said, I was in 3 or 4 major battles in the infantry. But the engineers, I only stayed in there roughly 2 months, I think, 2 or 3 months.
Okay, you were in the engineers only 3 months.
2 or 3 months,
Okay,
correct.
then you were reassigned to the
infantry.
infantry.
Correct.
And then you became involved in major battles.
Correct.
Okay, explain to us what happened during the first one. How did that occur?
Going right back to the propaganda lady, we would first go out with the platoon to see what the enemy had. Likewise, they would do the same thing. And when we had to report back to the company commander, and they made a choice from our officials where and when we would attack, be the aggressive, when we would attack. And you did not have to be in battle at all time. Out of 3 or 4 months, you will only be in battle, I guess, 3 or 4 times. Preparations, when it becomes real quiet, nothing going on, that is when each side is preparing for the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last stay on the front before the war ended, they said more firepower, air power, had, let me see what I'm trying to say here. There was more air power, military, and individual fire in the last hour than it had been in the last 2 weeks. Everyone was trying to get the last punch. And that happened on July the 19th, 1953.
So you said that your commanders made the decision when to go, when to
Yeah.
actually start the campaign?
Correct.
And how would they get the word to you that something was about to start?
Ask that question again, I didn't crack.
How did you get the word that a major campaign was about to begin?
Well, it created, started from our report, and then we had to go 2 or 3 times out to near the enemies, and always a officer would be involved in that trip. Lieutenants on up.
Okay.
I was only a corporal.
And the officer came back and reported?
Reported to the company, to the battalion commander of the regimental commander.
And then they made the decision.
When and where and so forth on.
Okay. So again, when your lieutenant came back and reported, and the regimental commander made the decision that we were going to attack,
Correct.
how did you get the word that you were going to attack?
It always came down from the company commander to the sergeant, and it was kind of real quiet that they did not tell us exactly when, but within the next, I say 3 hours, we're gonna have to do this. They did not want you to know in advance, because I feel like they thought we'd get excited too much.
Okay. So then when the command came, what did you do?
You have so many hours or so many minutes that we are going to go to this area here, Heartbreak Ridge, and we'll get the information. They did not let us know too much.
And then you put on your gear?
We kept our gear on most of the time, all the time.
Okay.
Sure did.
So the only thing you had to do was just pick up your rifle?
Correct.
And charge?
Correct. Well, now, when you in the infantry, you was mostly slept in a trench or a bunker.
Mm-hmm.
And then even the question you asked, most of the time the enemy attacked us more than we attacked them.
Mm-hmm. So you were in a defensive position most
Correct.
of the time?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and you were there for how long, Mr. Kemp?
I was on the front there about 8.5 months.
8.5 months.
Correct.
And during the other period of time, where were you?
Basic training, and then processing, coming back. Well, we did go back to Japan for a little while. Then we went, R&R.
When you say back to Japan, okay, this is what I'm getting at.
Okay.
There was an opportunity for you to have some
We had a
relief from
vacation
this.
called R&R.
Okay, when did that occur?
After you've been over there about 4.5 months,
Okay.
they give you a kind of a reset.
Yeah, I'll give you a break.
Correct.
And
Just too much on a person.
And when that time arrived, then you went to Japan.
Yeah, Christopher Rankin and myself, they gave us a 4 to 5 day leave.
Christopher Rankin, he was a
He
buddy
was
of yours?
Just a buddy of mine. He's from Hickory, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get to Japan?
Ship and plane. Ship to I'm sorry. 3 things. We had to ride a deuce-and-a-half truck for about 100 miles. Then we hit the Sea of Japan by ship, and then we flew from there to Tokyo, Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Tokyo.
And how many days did you spend in Tokyo?
About 4
days in
4.5
Tokyo?
days.
Okay.
And let me tell you an interesting point there.
All right.
We were going to the Ginza market, and we got off, what you want to call it, out of the limits of the GIs, and got on a subway, and we got pushed in the wrong line. And when we got in this wrong line, we would find ourselves on a subway train. And when it stopped, we must have been some 6, 7 miles from where we were supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't read the writing. We couldn't understand the language. And finally, this Japanese says to us, GI, this way. He told us where we were going to go.
Mm-hmm.
He put us on the right direction. So he sent us to a GI area. But that was a bad feeling when you can't read, can't understand the language, and don't know where you're going. That was interesting.
So it was good that some kind person came along.
Correct.
And sent you to the right place.
Correct.
And when you were at this GI area, you were able to go to movies?
Once we get into a military complex, we's all right then.
Okay.
Give you rank and name and all that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get back where we're supposed to go. And I'm going to say this. But then we came back to a recreational area in Tokyo. We was entertained.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then when you had to return to your unit in Korea,
Same old thing again.
how did you feel about going back when it was about time to go back?
Well, there was one little instrument I kind of got, it gave me some relaxation to get homesick. And what it was, in Tokyo, Japan, just before we went back to Korea, some kind of way we got to walk out to the beach in the ocean. And I looked across what I'm assuming would have been from Tokyo, Japan to Los Angeles, California. And I looked across that ocean and I got homesick. I said, I wish I could swim that ocean. I wouldn't go back to Korea. And you know the setup where Korea and Japan, the comparison between the two. But that didn't happen. So we went back to Korea, and after that it was pretty smooth going until 3 hours before the war ceased. That's when they were trying to get the last lick shot.
So you were over there at the time the war came to an end?
Correct, exactly. And about 2400 hours, July the 19th, 1953. But it became official, I think they said the 27th, until they all officially got together and,
During the time you were there, did you maintain contact with your family?
Oh yes,
back in the States?
Very much. About once a week, my mother, and I brought all those letters back that I could, get in my possession, and got back home here, and the building, my building got burnt down, and half of my letters was destroyed. To make it clear to you, I wasn't married at that time, and I compared the mother's love with my sisters, my girlfriends, and all. My mother had wrote as many letters as all the rest of them put together. Sometimes I think she would write twice a week.
And you would get mail regularly then?
Oh yeah, because that meant a lot to a soldier, the mail call, and you hear from your home. Yeah.
And you got letters from your mother and your sister?
I got letters from my mother more than once a week. My sister was about once every 2 weeks. And my girlfriend, at one time, she used to write real often, then she slowed up. And you know what that means. She went to Xavier University in New Orleans, yeah.
Was she going to Xavier at the time you were
Yes.
In the service?
Correct. And I think she met a pharmacy down there. I didn't marry her. All right.
So what happened then after you came back?
Finally, the rumors gets out that we're going home, And I think that we stayed there some 3 or 4 months after the war was over. Yeah, that make it right, about 4 months. And we get on the ship, and you know the process of ship rides and all of that. And I said once when we were coming over, we received New Testaments of the Bible. And when the Bibles were being dispersed coming back, I guess going over, at least 98% of the soldiers accepted Bibles. But coming back, I doubt if it was 50% of them accepted Bibles to read. The thing was over. We don't need to God no more now. We done made it. And then, I want to tell you about Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Go ahead.
Okay, as I said, no, I think I mentioned this before. We arrived at Fort Jackson, South Carolina in November, I believe. And we went through a procedure, processing and so forth, lasted there about a month, roughly. And then we were offered promotions if we would re-enlist. And then I changed my mind.
What was your rank at the time?
At that time, I was corporal. I was promoted to a sergeant. In fact, it was on my record at once, but since I didn't, we went through a process or something. We had a chance to deny it if we wished, but I can't remember exactly what happened now. But really, corporal. But going through the process of leaving and so forth on South Carolina, and then to come home in the Atlanta area, there must have been about 7 or 8 soldiers, and I'm assuming there's about 2 or 3 black, 5 or 6 whites, and we finally got our process over to be temporarily discharged. And we had rented a vehicle. It must have been 8 or 9 of us in a station wagon. And we decided that we needed some food before we got on the road. So we went to this little, really country restaurant who sold hamburgers, hot dogs, and so forth on.
What town was this in?
That was in Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
Columbia.
Is that where Fort Jackson is located?
Correct, near there.
Okay.
And we started in the front door, and from within, this attendant says, hey, y'all 2 or 3, whatever it was, 2 or 3, just because you have that uniform on, there's the side door. There's the side door. My mind run back to the propaganda lady over on the front line about the schools and so forth, lunch counters. And he says, just because you have that, I must say it this way, GD uniform on, there's the side door. The rest of the soldiers says to him, well, we just want so-and-so eat here. That was the white, because the white and black
All
learned
together.
to be together.
Mm-hmm.
And we went on to another place and received hot dogs and hamburgers and so forth. After we got home, it taken me a long time to adjust to my family. And I'm thinking about again the front line. If it should be your blood, remember, you died for your country. Who came on the scene? Bus, the lady in Alabama,
Rosa Parks?
Rosie Park, Martin Luther King, Andrew Young, Joseph Lowry. There was a war started here, and you know the rest there.
When you say it took you a while to adjust to your family, what was the problem?
I won't call myself shell-shocked. You have been abused so much. You have been disciplined so much. The freedom, I just don't know how to act as a free man, because you've been halfway brainwashed with pressures and even the military, but mostly the enemies over there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I got relaxed. And I think sometime now, I get some little, it has an effect on you. I've heard the word, I don't know if it's proper, not shell shocked or something, but too much.
Well, they call it
shell
post-traumatic syndrome now, PTSD, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you get a job as soon as you came back?
Oh, Lockheed helped mine until I got back. Lockheed helped my job.
They held your job until
Oh
you
yeah,
got back?
kept my seniority and all.
Okay.
Yeah,
When you went over, you were in the 11th grade.
correct.
What, did you complete your education?
Yes, I completed that, and I went to Chicago with the LaSalle Institution in drafting. I didn't really complete it, but I'm a draftman. I draw house plans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How did you go back to school, or did you do
Oh
it
yes,
by-
I went back to school.
You went back to school.
Correct.
Did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
Yes, I went to school there about a year after I got back. Sure did.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in the field of drafting and bricklaying and all of that. Bricklaying and carpentry.
So that's when you were in LaSalle in Chicago.
Correct.
Uh-huh. Was that also during the time you were still working for Lockheed?
Yes, well, yes, and I got relieved from Lockheed for 3 months, and I had to go back up there, I guess, 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was real busy. I got a job, I had a job at Lockheed. I went to Chicago, also got a leave from Lockheed at Ford Motor Company. And Ford Motor Company, I didn't like that area, period.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't stay there but less than a month.
And that was in Chicago?
That was in Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit, oh, I see,
Yeah.
okay. So you came back to Lockheed?
I came back to Lockheed. Lockheed was the best, in my opinion.
Okay, all right. And at what point did you get married?
I got married 1956, that's something, 56, December the 25th, Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
My son was born 1958. That's when I got a little confused there a little.
Okay.
My marriage,
And how many children do you have?
I have 3 children.
All right. You made reference to Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and Joseph Lowery. How did that affect you?
It really hurt. My mind had to go back to the propaganda lady on the front line. But even I must admit this, in comparison to today's with the younger generation, the younger generation tells me now that they wouldn't have put up with what we put up with back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And I says it wasn't really as hard to us because that was a tradition back in those days. But we knew it was wrong. But it would really be hard for me to put up with what I formerly have put up with now, since I've got a chance, opportunities and all of that. And I'm sure that you can follow what I'm saying there.
So you felt that Martin Luther King and Joseph Lowery should not have had to do what they did? Is that it?
No, they shouldn't have. And the method they had to use, definitely, they shouldn't have had to do that. They shouldn't have had to do that.
So what would you tell young people today about going into the military? Evidently you have mixed feelings about the military.
I don't. Good disciplines, especially basic training. That's one of. I think all our young people should go in the military. I really think that. But that front line, no. It's a big difference. Going in the military is a good. Any branch of military is a good place to be, whereas discipline is taught. And our young people just too many. I won't say all. Too many does not recognize discipline. They want to have their way, and I think that we are in too big a hurry. But definitely, some institution, by all means, get an education. By all means. And you can get education even in the military. Yes, sir.
So if they had to go into the military, like now, do you think they should go? We don't have a draft now. Do you think they should volunteer for the military?
I'm trying to fence. Let me see. How am I going to answer you on that? With the confusions, now, especially this war right now, I wouldn't recommend it at this point. I'm opposed to this war that we're in right now.
Well, you're opposed to war in general.
You're correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been very interesting, Mr. Kemp. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I'm appreciative to get this interview, and not always we have an opportunity to lay our heart down to someone, and I appreciate you. You seem like you just kind of revive me and bring me back to some thoughts And even at my age now, I can't think like I used to. It comes and goes. And it's been nice to hold this interview with me and to meet to you. And that's about all I have to say.
I'm going to ask you one more question.
Okay.
What is the most memorable thing that stands out in your mind concerning your military experience? You said sometimes, even now, you think about that. What do you think about when you think about that? When you think about your past military service?
Death.
Say more, please.
Can America stand death? And I pointed out about my mother. It may be easier for me to get it all over with. No. Your mother wants you back. And whatever it takes, fight on.
Very good.
Yeah. So,
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kemp. This has been, as I said, very interesting,
yeah.
and we really appreciate you coming forward.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.